Okay, welcome back everyone to another episode of This is Tech Talks. We have Jordan Powell here as our guest and Lars, who's joining us on the panel. Santosh can't make it today, unfortunately, but I'm sure us three have it figured out. We'll manage. Jordan, do you want to just give a quick intro about yourself? Tell everyone who you are and what you do and why we should listen to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but my name is Jordan Powell. I'm a DX engineer at Cypress. So basically, we have lots of teams at Cypress. We have our core product teams, and then I'm mostly centered like on the DX team around kind of integrations between Cypress and other communities. And so I actually, a little context, I spent most of the last, I don't know, like 5 years, like in primarily in the Angular community. And I felt like there was a lot of improvement to be made to kind of to join some of the Angular community with the Cypress community. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to take the job at Cypress, so that we can kind of try to continue to integrate them closer and closer, because my experience is most people in all communities love Cypress, but primarily the Angular community, I've always felt like really had a love for Cypress. So yeah, that's my story.
What is Cypress for everyone that is tuning in?
Well, the basic simplified version of that is Cypress is basically a testing tool that runs in JavaScript that ultimately can test anything in a browser. So anything you can run in a browser, you can test with Cypress, which is kind of the thing that separates it from, really any other testing tool for the most part. And so in the end, primarily we've kind of been known for end-to-end testing, which if you've ever done any of it historically, you've known the pain of like what that typically is. And when I saw Cypress for the first time, I remember thinking like, this is like witchcraft. Like, how are they doing this? Like, this is like, and not only that, like it felt fun. Like I wanted to try and do it. And so I always feel like a tool that's like, I think most people, if you've done engineering long enough, you know the benefits that testing provides, but it's like generally kind of a pain point. And so it's like, when it's like you could take something that's valuable but not fun and make it like fun and interesting, that's what I think it really makes, kind of separates Cypress from other testing platforms and things like that.
Yeah, that's huge, because testing, like, I hate testing. I'm not gonna lie. I hate writing tests. I hate maintaining tests. I know Shai Resnick, he's like always trying to like make testing fun and all this kind of stuff. He was always talking about that. So
yeah, I like talking with him this week. I'm like, you're a psycho. Like no one loves testing as much as you do.
No one, not a single person. So what's the difference between Cypress and what's the one that Angular used before? Protractor? Is Protractor the end-to-end testing
Protractor, one? Yeah, which is deprecated now. So now's a great time to start making the switch to Cypress, by the way. And one of the things, before I talk about the differences, is I'm actually focused on kind of like a campaign, if you will, or basically putting a focus on creating migration tools and scripts. So we actually have like a code mod coming out that basically you actually put in your Protractor code and it spits out the Cypress code, things like that. And then we have a schematic that converts your Protractor inside of your Angular and does the schematic and runs it so that it converts it to a Cypress project. So we're trying to really build tools to make that switch better. So but to answer your first question, I will say I've never been a humongous fan of Protractor. I love Angular, but anytime I ever worked with Protractor, which I will admit is fairly limited, I never enjoyed it. It always felt very painful. But the biggest difference is architecturally kind of the way, with Cypress, you're actually like running in a browser, like it wraps the browser. And so network requests, things like that, actually use the actual browser, versus Protractor. It's basically like sending commands, and it's kind of doing some trickery kind of stuff. But in the end, like the thing that's great about Cypress is you get the developer tools. Like you can literally open up the console and watch the network requests and console.log and do all the things that we do as a regular basis as engineers right in Cypress. So that's for me one of the biggest like elevator pitch differences.
Cool. Sweet. Yeah, I've honestly never used Protractor. I came into Angular development like near the end of its life cycle. So sounds like luckily I never had to.
Yeah, it's no slam against people. Maybe I'm sure there are people that enjoy it, but I found that from I don't know, it's my experience with it has always been much better with Cypress. So
that's totally fair. So version 10 of Cypress is coming out soon. What should we be paying attention to and looking out for?
So, well, it is going to be coming out very soon, and I'm very excited for that. Basically, we have a new UI, which I'm really excited for. The UI at Cypress hasn't had a lot of major changes to it over the years. And it's one of those things that we've been working in it internally for a while. And then like I was working on some like 9 and previous basically like versions. And I was like, this UI is horrible. Like you get used to one and then you're like, I thought I had like a super old one. I'm like, no, this is like a 9.0 project. Like, and again, it's not like a slant, but you know how that is. Like you get like sort of conditioned to something or other. So like there's going to be a new UI, and I can demo it a little bit for you guys if you want. As well as component testing is going to be the big new feature that we've been working on at Cypress for quite a while. And a lot of people probably, I don't know, component testing as a whole has not been something that's like super, like, at least I didn't know of it very well until like, I don't know, the last couple of years, but maybe it's been around longer. I'm not sure on that. But I would say the cool thing is that now with, traditionally you had to like all these different frameworks, and you had to learn like all their nuances and intricacies, their different APIs, all that kind of stuff. What now is basically we have like one unified test runner, test app that basically you use the same API, the same things you're used to using, the same tooling, and you can do end-to-end test as well as component testing. So it gives you the ability to do a very wide spectrum of testing across your apps that you wouldn't just get with just doing end-to-end testing.
Real quick, what's component testing? It may seem like it's...
No, I get it. Basically, the way this is a very Angular show, right? Or no? Yes? Not necessarily?
Okay. Web, JavaScript.
That's what, okay, I want to try.
Programming software, yeah.
Okay. I would say, so basically it's testing that does what it says. It tests components, but what it does is it actually, like we actually fire up a web server and we actually serve up that component, like mount it to the DOM, and then you can test things you want. So you want to test that it actually mounts, and then you want to test that, you can test that the classes are what you expect. If you hover over it, this changes, you click this and this event gets emitted. Like all the things that your components do that you want to make sure they keep doing, you can test with component testing. So it kind of bridges the gap where we would write a lot of unit tests in the past. I'm still like a big proponent of it wouldn't replace unit testing for me, because what if you have functions and things outside of a component? Like for instance, I'm a big NGRX person. And so it's like, if you have this big NGRX library, you're going to want to test your effects and your selectors and all those things, but you're going to need Jest or Karma or, some other framework to do unit testing on those things. But your components themselves, like if you in the Angular world, or it's like you can kind of use like Jest or something like that, but it doesn't actually render like in a browser, and so it's like you don't get to see any of the things that it's doing. Or with Karma, it kind of does it, but you don't get any of the cool like dev tools or just any of the experience that you get with Cypress for end-to-end. And so the cool thing is with component testing, you can actually see your component and the things that in the component right on, like in a browser, like the same Cypress browser. So does that kind of add a little clarity to that?
Totally. So how does it compare or use to something like Storybook?
Sure. So it is similar sort of to Storybook, except for Storybook, I hope I don't misrepresent what it does, but the way I've always understood it is basically it's not really a testing tool. It's more of like a library of, it's like a story, like a book. It's like, hey, this is a catalog of everything that are all of the components, that in our library. And so it does, that's kind of the main purpose. And you do kind of similar things where you pass it, you have different knobs. You want to make sure that if in this state it acts like this, and this state acts like this, but you're not really making assertions like you would with like a traditional component testing, or like with Cypress. And so that's the big difference. You do get it does render it. You do get actually see it in the DOM like you would Storybook, but it's not, at least as of this release, a catalog that gets for you to send out and kind of act as like a resource almost for documentation for your app. So
totally,
they're actually adding this thing called interactions or something like that, where you can specify, not record, but replay interactions with your component and run assertions at the same time using something like, I believe it's the testing library, like React testing library and that sort of thing.
Nice.
But that's brand new. I'm not sure it's entirely released and stable yet, but it's cool to see that they're trying to expand on what you can do with Storybook.
Sure.
In that regard.
And the beautiful thing about open source and just like, the JavaScript world we live in, it's like there's like so many great tools, and it's like, depending upon, what your team is, the size, the goals, all those things, there's lots of different choices, so like you said, that's cool.
All of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's enough.
And actually, we have
integrations,
I believe. I'm pretty sure we have basically integrations where it's like, we're trying to take your story stuff you already have and then basically make it really easy to write Cypress component testings on top of that and stuff like that.
Nice.
Oh, do you support this, what's it called, the CSF format, component story format?
I am not sure about that question. And I don't want to misquote the support that we do have for Storybook, but I know that we recognize that Storybook has a big sector of the market and what it does. And so I think that our goal is to not replace it, but basically to kind of like work with it,
But the component story format is meant for integration across tooling. So you could, with your Cypress component test, mount and so on, you could mount a story in your test and then test it through the story.
Interesting. Yeah, that's news to me. Yeah, it's pretty cool though.
Cool. So let's see a demo then of the new UI and component testing. I know some people in the chat want to see it, and I'm really curious.
Alrighty, let me pull this up here. Share my screen. Give me permission. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So let me, and for the record, we are the 10.0 release will have component testing support at some level for React as well as Vue. I'm actually working on the Angular implementation of this. So it just to clarify for people, like the Angular won't be coming with the 10.0 release, but this is a proof that we're working on it. So
Okay.
Which is a question I get all the time. When is it coming for Angular? So let me fire this up.
Well, you're seeing StreamYard right now, just FYI.
Oh, you're not seeing, okay. You're not seeing my code. Okay, let me see. Share screen.
I think the community already provided Cypress component test for Angular. The JS Cutlery team created a bunch of libraries. So
Yes,
that you can
there.
somehow do it.
Can you see my screen now?
It's
Still StreamYard
StreamYard.
though.
It says I'm sharing my screen.
Mhm.
We can build the code, but we can't even use it. Let's see.
Classic.
Share my screen.
If us devs aren't able to figure out the technology, maybe you can just share an open source repo if you have.
Yeah, I can
repo.
share repo. I don't know why it's not working, but I'm sorry.
I mean, you are successfully sharing your screen. It's just you're sharing Firefox.
I'm sharing. Okay, hang on. Let me try one more thing, and then we can. It says entire. I don't know. This doesn't make no sense. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Might be browser issues. With
Yeah, I
StreamYard.
think it is. Sorry, but yeah, I can share some repos. It's you guys will, and like I said, in about a very soon, we'll start making announcements, I'm sure, for when it gets released and that kind of stuff. So you're gonna love the UI, and the ability to do component testing is really, like, before it was kind of like we had support, but it was kind of like it was very alpha, like you had to opt into it and a bunch of stuff. Well, you'll notice like the experience is very baked into the whole thing. So
Cool. So this is coming from an Angular dev.
Yeah.
How much longer is it going to take for me to be able to use component testing after 10 gets released? Because I want to use it.
Yeah, I understand.
I want everybody to use it.
So I'm hopeful not longer. I can't give you a date, but it is something we're actively working on. And at this point, I'm assuming that will become a very high priority after, like, once the release is done. Then a lot of the teams will focus on taking some of the parts that are built and kind of getting it across the finish line. The thing is, like, with Cypress, we had to be like, it's crazy when you look at the metrics. I mean, we have it's like 3.7 million downloads a week or something of Cypress. It's like, and it's used by it's millions of hours of CI, and it's like we have so many tests. It's like so many people are using it. We want to make sure Cypress works really well, because if not only it's just bad for everyone if it doesn't work. So, yeah, like, I think for us, we would want to make sure it's very stable and stuff like that. But I will say it is really cool, and the experience will be very similar to. It'll feel Cypressy, but also feel like Angular. Like, it'll feel native, if that makes sense.
Does,
yep. As long as you deliver on your promises.
Boy, that's a big pressure from you.
I'm wondering about the developer experience. Like, do things show up in the Cypress log? Like you're talking about the Cypress developer tools and so on, and one of the great things there is the log that shows up that kind of has a snapshot of the DOM and things like that. Will that be available, and HTTP requests and things like that?
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing is it's literally everything from that standpoint will be the same. Like you still have all of the things you love about Cypress as part of component testing. The way you, and the big difference is essentially like in your code, instead of side.visiting a route and then getting the things and doing your assertions or whatever, it's like the difference is now you're just using we have a mount command, and you just mount the component instead of visiting a page, and then you do all your Cypress things on it. But you do get the logging, all the other things with it, which is, in my opinion, like, there is a cost. Like with Jest is great because it's fast, like it just works. Like, and again, that's going to be hard to compete with anything that actually runs in a browser, because browsers are bigger and they're a little longer to load. But the good thing is you get a lot more benefits when you run things in a browser. So like you said, all the things you love, they're going to be a part of it. And but you can still also run Cypress component testing, and then you can run it headlessly in your terminal too. So if you just want to run it in the CI, or you just want to run it to make sure it passes, you don't want to go through I don't want to see it work, I just want to know it still works when I'm working on a feature, you can still do it like that too.
So in terms of performance, say I'm using something like NX and I'm running my tests in parallel, right? If I run like 4 component tests in parallel across different libraries, do I reuse the same browser instance? Or do I open up like a new headless browser for each test suite?
Okay, say that again. I want to make sure I understand you.
So like, say I have like a bunch of
NX,
different libraries.
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of different libraries, right? They have their own, component testing setups and Cypress configurations, and they're independent, isolated test suites, right? If I run those test suites in parallel, will the Cypress binary spin up multiple headless browsers, one for each test suite, or will it know, oh, I already have this browser running, I'm going to reuse it and open up a new tab? I don't know if that's how it works.
Yeah.
But.
Okay, so I think to answer the question, basically, another big difference with 10.0 is historically you had a Cypress.json file that would live in the root of your project. To support some of the features we're adding, we had to switch to a Cypress config.js or .ts file. So that is a breaking change, and we have a migrator that helps you get from 9 to 10 to help get past that breaking change. But in your config, you can specify like, hey, this is the pattern to look for all of my component tests, for all of my end-to-end tests. So the same thing with end-to-end is like, in theory, it's like, NX, it spins up an end-to-end application for your whatever application you're running. But it's like, basically you could in your instance, you could create a Cypress library that basically just does component testing across all those libraries in one instance, because in the end, for each one, it's gonna just mount those components, and it just has to know where to find all of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
As long as they're like, the only difference would be like they have to be the same framework. Like if you're crossing frameworks, there could be some tricks. But I'm sure the people at NX will be able to figure that out. And we've actually been working with them so that there will be some great tools. So like they're working on some things. So like you can do Cypress component testing inside of your applications. Like there'll be some flags and things like that. So you can add those as part of your workflow there, as well as helping with so there's generators, as well as helping with sort of the migration from, hey, we're 9 to 10. Okay, now how do we get there?
Cool. Sweet. Lars, you got anything? What are you curious about?
Yeah, you already discussed NX, so yeah, that's great to hear because they usually have great integration with many different toolings, right, and migrations and so on. What I'm interested in, what are the great features of Cypress that are paid? Like, what do you get? Like, most of this is free, but what can you get if you pay for some of the features as well?
Yeah, so the big thing currently at Cypress is we have what's known as our dashboard or our cloud product, which ultimately, like I said, all those things I mentioned are free and it's open source, and you can go and look at the 10.0 release and run it yourself and see everything we're doing. That's the cool thing about open source. But we do have a paid portion for our dashboard. Ultimately, what it gets you is it's going to, so you go through all this work, you build a bunch of end-to-end tests or component tests or whatever it is, and you get all the safety of that. But then it's like, okay, now you want to run it in your CI, and you want to make sure, as you can continuously deploy, that these things don't, they're not breaking, and you want to make sure those tests run, which you can still do for free. But we have a dashboard product that ultimately it gives some additional features. One of the big ones for a lot of people is parallelization. So if you have like a test suite that the more like N10 particularly, you got to you got to actually load a new browser and then do a bunch of work and then maybe load the browser again. And it can become, it can take time because you're actually doing all these things. It's still much faster than doing them manually, but it does take time. So you can run those things in parallel. So instead of like maybe taking 30 minutes to run, you run them in parallelization mode and it maybe takes like 5 or 10 minutes. So things like that really save. And I wish I had the number offhand, but it was like the number of years we saved customers last year from our dashboard, our clients, our customers. It was amazing. Just the literal time that we saved in CI using parallelization was like mind blowing. As well as like with the 10.0 release in our Cypress runner itself, it actually has a lot of integrations. So you get like historical analytics and things like that. Not only in our dashboard, we have like a browser as well as in the test runner. And so you get, it'll tell you things like this test has been flaky over time. And sometimes it passes, sometimes it doesn't. And it'll give you like a percentage of times that it's passed and failed. And it gives you a lot of like really cool analytic things that that you just don't get like by not paying for that, I guess. So I'm not a salesman at all for the dashboard product, but it is really cool. I've used it. And obviously if you have questions, I'm sure we help you guys help you get migrated over there. We got a great team over there that helps with that. So
totally. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Jordan. We got to wrap up now, but one last thing. Is there anything you want to shout out before we end the show today? Cypress or otherwise?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I should have been prepared for this, guys. And you even told me. Honestly,
only a half hour ago.
Yeah, I will say this. I run a nonprofit, and so I do missions work in Central and South America primarily. So if you ever have been wanting to go on a mission trip before, and it's something you're interested in, you're welcome to come hang out, and we can come up, join us on a trip sometime. Or if you're just interested in the kind of work we're doing and want to support it, that'd be awesome. But the website for that is dreamon.world. And like I said, I guess that's the only thing I could think to plug right now. So
awesome. That's amazing. The company that I founded is a fundraising platform for charities and nonprofits.
Oh,
we're
nice.
we're trying to turn the charity industry into more of a sustainable business model rather than just asking for donations all the time.
For sure. Yeah, we should talk then. Yeah.
Totally. I'll send you a message. I'm really passionate about that kind of stuff. So it's awesome to hear. Cool. Well, thanks a lot, everyone, for coming today. Jordan, we learned a lot from you. I know that I had a little bit of experience with Cypress, but never really delved into it too much. So I'm super excited about the component testing. And yeah, anything else we want to add, Lars?
Yeah, well, I've been using Cypress for half a year now, and my sister teams recently switched to Playwright. and I don't know specifics why. It was something about cross-domain things that didn't work, but I'm sticking with Cypress because I think I'm going to miss those developer tools, and maybe they have them in Playwright, but I don't think so because I think it's more like Puppeteer.
Yeah, so the cross-domain thing has been a big issue for Cypress users for a long time. Architecturally, there are some big challenges with that, but I will say this, and I'm not promising again, but I will say I know that it's something that we've been working on and meeting on a lot recently, I've seen, and I'm hopeful that we will have a solution for that at some point in the nearish future. But again, if it doesn't happen, don't come knocking on my door. But I do believe that it's something that we'll be able to accomplish here soon. But there is Playwright. Yeah, like you said, I think Microsoft bought them, and they're obviously some people like what they're doing. It's very different. The main difference is, we're promise centered. So it's like it's Cypress is not exactly promises, but it's like promises, and basically it passes one thing to the next, and the browsers are very much like that, and so that's kind of the way we architecturally did it that way. But ultimately, yeah, like there's lots of great testing tools out there.
Yeah, my favorite one is using Cypress with the testing library. So there's a plugin called Cypress Testing Library, which is similar to Angular Testing Library and React Testing Library.
Yeah.
And I love it because I can write tests in the same way in both in the framework component tests and with Cypress end-to-end tests, for example.
Nice. Yeah, that's the beauty of open source. Like there's like always a solution. So many times you think of, how do I do that? And then there's like, oh, there's this thing yesterday I looked at, had like 30-some million downloads a week. And I was like, I never heard of it, but it's like exactly what I needed, and it was perfect. So
yeah, exactly. Open source to the win.
For sure.
Thank you so much for coming, Jordan. It was nice meeting you and learning about Cypress.
Absolutely. My pleasure, guys.
I look forward to us all getting together once we're capable of making that work.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. See ya. Bye, everyone.
Bye.